Senator, from our view, the budget number 961 meets the requirements and threats that we face. And
that's not the number. The number is 892.6. You're adding reconciliation. That's my whole point. Why not give us a base budget of 961 or whatever the right number is, what you consider the right number, and then we can operate and make our decisions. Why do it in this bifurcated way that really is fooling the American people about what the defense budget is?
We're not trying to fool anybody, sir. It's 2 bills, 1 budget. We're working with OMB, and we feel very comfortable with the number of $961 billion.
Why don't you give us a straight-up budget for the Defense Department?
This Senate exchange between Senator Angus King and the Defense Secretary is more than just another budget argument. It cuts deep into America's struggle to reconcile its history with its values.
Mr. Secretary, I'm somewhat puzzled. I grew up in Virginia, where Robert E. Lee was revered. I think when I was a kid, his birthday was a school holiday. But as I grew older and learned more about American history, I learned that he fit the classic definition of a traitor. He took up arms against his country. He broke his oath as a member of the United States Army, which he took upon entering his career at West Point. Why are you going through these incredible gymnastics, finding current soldiers or other soldiers to rename? And you slipped a minute ago. You said we're returning these bases to their original names. Robert E. Lee, leading general of the Confederacy, Pickett, the other names. Why are you doing this? I don't understand what the motivation is to rename bases for people who took up arms against their country on behalf of slavery. What possible motivation can there be for this? Who is telling you to do this? Who is urging you to do this?
Senator, the veterans and service members across the country who have deployed from Fort Bragg or Fort Benning or Fort Hood or Fort Pickett, there's a legacy, there's a connection to those bases and to those places, to what they trained for there, what they did for, and what they came home back to. That matters to them. Ask enough of them, as I do, all the time, before and later. And we recognize the service of those who were put into the replacement. No one's disputing that. I would never dispute that. What we're looking at is erasing history, erasing names, erasing base names that service members are tied to. Talk to people that serve at Bragg. Ask people that serve at Fort Bragg or Fort Benning if they like the fact that the names have been returned. And to a man and to a woman, they will tell you, thank God we're back to Fort Bragg, and thank God we're back. And thankfully, because so many men and women in this country have served, there's a Benning and a Bragg and a Pickett and a Hood that has a Silver Star or a Medal of Honor that we could rename the base to because of the limits of what Congress allowed us to do. So this is something we've been proud to do, something that's important for the morale of the Army, and those communities appreciate that we've returned it back to what it was instead of trying to play this game of erasing names.
We're not erasing history, Mr. Secretary. We're recognizing history and recognizing that mistakes have been made in this country. The greatest of all was the Civil War, where people took up arms against their country on behalf of the institution of slavery. And to continue the practice of recognizing those people and honoring them by the naming of these bases is, I believe, an insult to the people of the United States. Let me talk about the budget. I don't understand why the budget is coming to us in 2 pieces. Why not give us an honest base budget instead of putting a piece of it in reconciliation? As I understand it, OMB is saying we're going to have a flat defense budget for the next 4 or 5 years. Are we planning reconciliation every year from now on? Why not give us an honest budget telling us what your priorities are, and then we can consider it. This committee always works in a bipartisan basis on a defense budget. We all want to see some increases in the defense budget, and yet you're giving us this this fake, here's a piece of the budget, here's another. You're cutting, in the base budget, you're cutting shipbuilding in half and saying, well, we're going to make it up in reconciliation. Are we going to have reconciliation every year, which basically, by the way, puts a significant part, 10 or 15% of the defense budget in an wholly partisan decision-making process, whereas in the history of this committee, it's always been bipartisan. Why are we doing it this way?
Senator, from our view, the budget number 961 meets the requirements and threats that we face. And
That's not the number. The number is 892.6. You're adding reconciliation. That's my whole point. Why not give us a base budget of 961 or whatever the right number is, what you consider the right number, and then we can operate and make our decisions. Why do it in this bifurcated way that really is fooling the American people about what the defense budget is?
We're not trying to fool anybody, sir. It's two bills, one budget. We're working with OMB, and we feel very comfortable with the number of 961 billion.
Why don't you give us a straight-up budget for the Defense Department? That's my question.
Senator, this is a straight-up budget for the Defense Department, and it's a 13% increase over what Joe Biden gave us.
It is a two-part defense budget. Part of it is in reconciliation instead of in the budget that's being presented to this committee. This committee only has a partial review of the budget. I don't understand why we can't have an honest, straightforward budget instead of this son of Oko that you're putting over on us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
King's question about why U.S. military bases are being renamed away from Confederate generals strikes at the core of national identity, what we choose to honor, and what that says about who we are. The Secretary defends the decision to restore traditional names like Fort Bragg, claiming it's about morale and connection to service numbers. But King challenges that logic, arguing that continuing to celebrate men who took up arms against the United States is not preserving history, it's glorifying rebellion and slavery. This isn't a simple renaming debate, it's a moral reckoning over how America defines patriotism. Subscribe for more breakdowns of moments like this that dig into what truly shapes our nation's conscience. But Senator King's frustration doesn't stop at history. It turns sharply toward honesty and transparency in government spending. He questions why the Defense Department is delivering what he calls a two-part budget, one part in the normal defense request and another buried inside reconciliation, a partisan process that bypasses bipartisan review. His concern is simple but serious. If the defense budget is one of the largest and most critical in the country, why not present it all in the open? Why play games with numbers that make it harder for Congress and the public to understand how money is really being spent? For King, it's about accountability. If the true defense spending is $961 billion, then that's what Americans deserve to see up front, not hidden between political lines. Subscribe if you value transparency and want to stay informed on how power and policy actually work behind the scenes. And at the heart of all this is a clash between symbolism and substance, between how we remember the past and how we fund the future. Renaming bases tied to the Confederacy is a symbolic act of progress, while restructuring the budget process is a practical test of honesty. Yet both issues reveal something deeper. America is still struggling to align its ideals with its actions. We talk about freedom and unity, yet still wrestle with remnants of division, whether it's the legacy of slavery or the politics of money. King's questioning forces us to ask, are we willing to face uncomfortable truths to build a nation that actually lives by its values? Subscribe for more thoughtful political analysis that doesn't just report the news, but helps you understand what it really means.